One of the greatest examples of Israel's lack of interest in actually an amenable conclusion to all of this and a ceasefire is that every single time Hamas says, yes, we will abide by the deal that you've designed for the Palestinian population, they go, nope, that's unacceptable. The American envoys come out and say, it's all Hamas's fault. You're in a bind at that point. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So let's get started. Thank you, Themasius, for the playlist. We're going to start our broadcast by talking about Hamas agreeing to release the 10 hostages in response to a ceasefire plan. Now, the reason why this is significant is because in some ways it resembles the exact same ceasefire proposal that was pushed around over and over again that Israel kept saying no to, but Hamas has once again said yes to it. I assume Israel will still find a way to ruin this, but here it is. Hopefully there will be an end to the death and the destruction and a little bit of real humanitarian aid going in. A little bit of real humanitarian aid going in to the Strip. But let's see.
Early this morning at one of the controversial new aid sites in Gaza's far south. Video provided by the US Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which all week has been pushing back against reports of chaos. Today, it may have been short of that, but it was hardly ordered. It does, though, speak to the continuing desperation of Gaza's people. Just look at the joy of this woman. No matter the long walk ahead, back out of an Israeli military zone.
The catastrophic situation in Gaza, it is the worst since the war began. Humanitarian needs have exploded in Gaza following the 80 days of the nearly total blockade of aid going into the Gaza Strip.
What so many in Gaza desperately want, of course, is an end to the war, even a pause in it. And today Hamas has at last given its response to this week's US ceasefire proposal, agreeing to some of its elements, a 60-day truce, the release of 10 living and 18 dead Israeli hostages, but less clear on the issue that had stymied previous ceasefire plans, whether and when the war would be permanently ended. In its statement, Hamas said this proposal aims to achieve a permanent ceasefire, a comprehensive withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and ensure the flow of aid to our people and our families in the Gaza Strip. Last night, President Trump was bullish that Hamas would accept.
They want to get out of that mess. They're in a big mess. I think they want to get out of it.
There are reports in Israel that Hamas wants to revise the timeline for the release of the hostages. The Reuters news agency says a Hamas official said they were responding positively to the US proposal, but were seeking some amendments. In the past, Israel has treated such counteroffers as rejections, similar language being used tonight in a briefing to Israeli reporters. Meanwhile, the desperation in Gaza compounds. 77 aid trucks belonging to the World Food Programme blocked and looted before they could get to their destinations. WFP workers appealing from their car for people to take just one sack of flour each.
Harry Fawcett there. Well, I'm joined now by the British.
I have seen the Freedom Flotilla stuff. Now, obviously, I'm gonna dive into the details of this, the nitty gritty of this, because there's obviously some interesting stuff coming out of this proposal and the back and forth. As you guys know, the initial situation with this was that the Hamas envoys, directly speaking to Steve Witkoff, had given a very reasonable proposal back to the American side, which was supposed to be presented to the Israeli side. It was going to be all for all, full hostage release, 90-day ceasefire, but they whittled it down to 60 days. With conditions on moving into the next round of negotiations, as the last round of ceasefire talks was taking place. If you remember, the last time Israel actually conceded and engaged in a real ceasefire. Now, that is not a real thing. Israel's counterproposal to that was basically a 7-day ceasefire, and that's basically it. And since I started the broadcast, Witkoff has already actually said no to the Hamas ceasefire proposal, saying that their response is unacceptable. Why is it unacceptable? Because clearly Israel does not want it, okay? I'm going to get into it in a second. Hold on. I know the Drop Site News additional reporting has come out, but I want to walk through it piece by piece. One of the most significant aspects of the Hamas proposal is that Hamas alongside all of the regional actors, all the Gulf nation states, have come out and said, we want to dissolve Hamas. We no longer want to run the Gaza Strip. Now, this is part of what Israel wanted to do, right? Israel wants to eradicate Hamas. Israel keeps saying Hamas can no longer run the Gaza Strip. And Hamas is like, okay, we will do that. And we will do that as long as there can be a technocratic Palestinian committee that runs the Gaza Strip in unison with the West Bank as well. And it's a technocratic Palestinian council comprised of like people from different backgrounds and some that were formerly a part of Hamas on the civil governance side. And the issue here is that solution makes too much sense. And Israel just says, no, we want Hamas to run the Gaza Strip. And it's really weird. Okay, this is not the same thing as dissolving Hamas. Don't repeat that talking point. No, it is effectively dissolving the Hamas grip of power on the Gaza Strip. So it is not a talking point. It is the truth. Obviously, if you're the Minister of Agriculture, whether you're Hamas or not doesn't matter. You're still going to be the Minister of Agriculture within that technocratic Palestinian National Committee or Palestinian National Council. But if you are a part of like the militancy or whatever, it's factually not true. Is PIJ dissolved because they're not government? No. What they're trying to do is basically turn around and recreate a. Why are you arguing with me on this? On the militancy side, they're not disarming. Okay, the Al-Qassam brigades will remain. Okay, until there is a standing military and full-blown sovereignty for Palestinians, same as Palestinian Islamic Jihad's militancy, okay? And numerous other factions. Hamas can't even control, because you're repeating it and it's just not true. They are willing to abdicate government, not dissolving as a resistance org. I never said that. You're the one who's saying that. I'm literally saying the civil governance side of Hamas will dissolve as it is. And then there will be a technocratic Palestinian National Committee that can be comprised of former Hamas politicians that were only involved in civil governance affairs. It does nothing to the militancy side because, understandably, as there's a genocide going on, why the would people put their weapons down until there is a permanent ceasefire and a new military structure that is recognized by international authorities? Obviously, no one's going to go, hey, I know you guys are genociding us right now, but we're going to put our weapons down. That's not going to happen. Okay? So, basically, this morning early, Jeremy Scahill reported, Hamas says it responded to Witkoff proposal with its own suggested changes. This proposal aims to achieve a permanent ceasefire, comprehensive withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and ensure the flow of aid to our people, Hamas said in a statement. As a part of this agreement, 10 living Israeli prisoners held by the resistance will be released and 18 bodies will be returned in exchange for an agreed-upon number of Palestinian prisoners. Now remember, all of the remaining hostages are not actually technically hostages. They were enemy combatants, and therefore they're prisoners of war. So that's another thing that you have to recognize. Whereas the overwhelming majority of the Palestinian militants, or not Palestinian militants, sorry, the Palestinians under military detention are actually not enemy combatants at all. They're just random teenagers and shit that have been basically kidnapped from the street in the West Bank, where Israel is an illegal occupant. So that is part of the goal here, is to try and release as many Palestinians that are held in captivity by the Israeli state as possible. There's more than 10,000 of them. And that is part of this design. That's part of the ceasefire negotiations. But one of the most significant aspects of this, as I said, was a deal that Hamas reached last week with Witkoff. They agreed to hand over governors of Gaza to an independent Palestinian technocratic committee. In order to get Israel on board, the new agreement struck with Israel would leave Hamas in control, according to the draft agreement obtained by Jeremy Scahill. If you consider yourself a person who can think independently, I want you to think about what that means. Specifically, why is Hamas willing to give up control in order to get a peace deal, yet Israel insists on keeping Hamas in control? Why would that be? The reason why I'm saying this is because all of the other regional actors, like all the Gulf states, are also on board with the national committee structure. Virtually everyone is willing to recreate a full-blown civil governance that is no longer associated with the political faction of Hamas. Okay, even if they are former Hamas members, obviously the education minister is going to be a part of the Hamas party, and he is no longer going to be affiliated with Hamas, but still be a part of the education ministry. Like, that makes sense if they haven't been assassinated already, right? So the reason why I point to this is because Israel's ambitions here is to maintain Hamas as a control structure in the Gaza Strip, because they want to use, like they did with the hostages, they want to use Hamas as a reason to continue the ethnic cleansing campaign. And obviously, on the civil governance side, they understand this. They understand that that is the reality, which is why they are saying, okay, we will no longer have political control over the Gaza Strip. We will allow the Gaza Strip to be run by, a technocratic Palestinian committee. Okay? Interesting that all the regional players on Hamas included want to dissolve Hamas, but Israel wants to keep Hamas in power to continue its ethnic cleansing of Gaza while framing it as exterminating Hamas. That is the goal for Israel here. And the reason why I'm specifying this, the reason why I'm mentioning this, is because it's important to understand their ambitions here, so you understand when they are actually lying. Okay? Everything that Israel says obviously is a lie, but this one is a particularly egregious lie, considering that their overall ambition, their number one goal, is the permanent eradication of Hamas, right? That's what Israel keeps saying. But also simultaneously, there are internal voices within the Israeli military structure that say there is no functional way of eradicating Hamas. It's a political problem. Hamas is offering a political solution to this political problem, and then Israel keeps saying, no, we have to militarily defeat Hamas. The reason why they're saying that, while simultaneously Haaretz reporting has showed that they have actually only seized 2,700 small arms. Okay, think about this. Hundreds of thousands dead, only 2,000 small arms. What does that tell you? It tells you that their ambitions are not about, eradicating Hamas or fighting a militancy, but instead a complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population. This is something that, what is a small arm? Small arms are weapons that people use. Okay? 2,700 small arms is like one gun nut in America. Obviously. But if they've only secured 2,700 small arms, let's say a lot of that is under the rubble. Let's say that they haven't extracted a big chunk of it. Let's say it's 5,000 small arms. That means they've only killed, 5,000 enemy combatants? I'm doubling the number here, okay? I'm doubling the number here so that this is more favorable to Israel. Out of the 60,000 that were officially confirmed killed by Israeli bullets or Israeli rockets, okay? Tens of thousands still under the rubble and haven't been found. It's obviously an undercount. Lancet estimates put it at far, far larger than this, right? Anyone else notice Hasan been acting more capitalist lately? Yeah, I love capitalism. Lock in, chatter. We're talking about some serious shit here. Yeah, they're just killing children. That's it. They're starving and killing women and children and civilian men and the elderly, and that's precisely what's going on. They're making Gaza deliberately uninhabitable in an effort to permanently displace all of the Palestinians living in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. In any case, so Hamas says, yeah, we're on board. Here's our counter proposal, and we agree to it, right? Here's the full text of the Hamas statement. After conducting a round of national consultations and based on our immense sense of responsibility towards our people and their suffering, the Islamic resistance movement Hamas today submitted its response to the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's latest proposal to the mediating parties. This proposal aims to achieve a permanent ceasefire, comprehensive withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and ensure the flow of aid to our people and our families in the Gaza Strip. As part of this agreement, 10 living prisoners in the occupation held by the resistance will be released, in addition to the return of 18 bodies, in exchange for an agreed-upon number of Palestinian prisoners. I'm told by sources that Hamas submitted a document in the same 13-point format as the Witkoff term sheets that included more specific language about total Israel withdrawal, a long-term truce, humanitarian aid, and exchange of captives. Interesting, in Hamas's new proposal, it reinserted language that Israel and Witkoff removed that says that Hamas would relinquish all governance and management of Gaza to an independent technical committee of Palestinians. Israel and Witkoff paper didn't mention this at all. So Hamas keeps saying, we are no longer going to have the responsibility of governing the Gaza Strip. Okay? We are no longer going to have the responsibility of governing the Gaza Strip. The civil governance division is effectively dissolved. In their proposal, Israel keeps deleting that from the proposal and saying, no, you're not. You're still responsible for the Gaza Strip. The reason why they're doing that is because they're openly saying that they're assassinating ministers of agriculture, people that are trash collectors, people that are a part of the civil governance affairs, like people that are part of the civilian police force, and then saying, oh, we're assassinating Hamas, because they want to do that. They want to kill all of the people that effectively ran the Gaza Strip for as long as they did in an effort to further destabilize the Gaza Strip. One must ask the question, why? Why is it that if Israel's final ambition here, stated ambition here, is to effectively remove Hamas from power, eradicate the political grip that Hamas has on the Gaza Strip, and Hamas are saying, okay, we'll relinquish control over the Gaza Strip, why is Israel saying, no, you have to still be in charge of the Gaza Strip? Why do you think that's happening? And now, this. U.S. has rejected the Hamas ceasefire proposal. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff called the Palestinian resistance group's response totally unacceptable, claiming it only takes us backward. He did not specify which of the amendments Hamas proposed in the Israeli-approved framework that he found unacceptable. Witkoff said the framework backed by Israel is the only way to secure a 60-day ceasefire deal in the coming days. I received the Hamas response to the United States proposal. It is totally unacceptable and only takes us backwards. Hamas should accept the framework proposal we put forward as the basis for proximity talks, which we can begin immediately this coming week. That is the only way we can close a 60-day ceasefire deal in the coming days, in which half of the living hostages and half of those who are deceased will come home to their families, and in which we can have, at the proximity talks, substantive negotiations in good faith to try and reach a permanent ceasefire. Now, ironic that the American envoy is saying that we will have good faith negotiations when Hamas, in an effort to reach good faith negotiations by cutting Israel out of the deal, knowing that Israel is a spoiling party here, thought that they could directly talk to the United States of America. And in an effort to start those talks, they literally got assurances from the United States of America that aid would be let back into the Strip after 3 months of starvation. And they released the American-Israeli IDF soldier, Edon Alexander, with nothing. Like they just straight up released Edon Alexander while Trump was doing his Middle Eastern rounds. And what did the American envoys do? What did the American government do in response to that good faith prisoner of war release, with nothing but a commitment and assurances from the American side? They said, Israel can do whatever it wants. Israel angrily retaliated and lashed back out at the Palestinian population once more in the process, while Donald Trump was visiting all the Gulf leaders. So for them to turn around and say, oh, well, I can't believe, like, let's start a good faith negotiation with Hamas, like, it's bullshit. These guys are not interested in this at all, because if they were, they would tell Israel to stop. Remember, this is ultimately in the hands of the American government, okay? This is ultimately the responsibility of the American government. Make no mistake. Do not forget, America has all the power here to get Israel to stop if they chose to do so, and they are refusing to do so. It is simply a singular phone call. This is identical to the Biden-Blinken framework. This is identical to the way Biden and Blinken worked with Israel and ran cover for Israel.
Israeli analyst Daniel Levy, who's president of the US Middle East Project, and he served as a peace negotiator during the premierships of both Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Barak. Daniel Levy, thanks very much for coming in. Our
attack dog is not off the leash, chatters. We want our attack dog to be off the leash in the ways that it is. We want this to happen. Make no mistake. We want this to happen. The American government is looking at the situation, and the only thing that could be productive is if we were to somehow get the United States government to apply enough pressure to the U.S. government to apply pressure to stop Israel, basically. The faster that people realize that this is not happening as a random third party that we have no control over, and it's actually something that we have direct control over, that we have direct responsibility over, the easier it will be for people to understand what's going on. Okay? Anyone that says, oh, it's out of our hands, when talking about the responsibility that the American government bears here is either stupid or lying to you. It's that simple. One phone call.
It's just another mood in the chess game.
Hasan, I live in Houston. Can we link up for just 15 minutes? No. What are you talking about?
Or something genuinely of significance.
Given the scenes of desperation, starvation, the horrors being inflicted on the Palestinians in Gaza, one would love to believe this is a real shift. Unfortunately, right now, Netanyahu is working assiduously so that the Trump administration and those in the West and elsewhere who've been leaning rhetorically into doing more see this as enough for them to back down. The families of those being held in Gaza, protesting in Israel right now, are convinced that Netanyahu doesn't want a deal. I think they're right. He prefers to be able to blame the other side, because what Hamas are saying is, yes, as long as this is part of a permanent ceasefire, full
and
withdrawal,
that's a no-go for Netanyahu, right?
Netanyahu has made it very clear, even after you release hostages, we will continue.
Annihilation.
We'll continue with what I think is ethnic cleansing and genocide.
But would the US necessarily fall in the line in the way you indicated there? They've gone over the heads of Israel before now to speak directly to Hamas.
That's one of the interesting dynamics in play here, Alex. They have. One of the things that's happened these last weeks is that American envoys, and it should be obvious, of course you speak to Hamas. Should be obvious for the UK as well, but they have spoken to the Hamas leadership. Someone called Bishara Baba has been going back and forth. It seems that what he proposed to Hamas and what the envoy we've all been hearing about, Witkoff, closed with the Israelis were different. Hamas has basically stuck to the original agreement. There have been differences between the Trump administration and Netanyahu on the Iran talks, on removing sanctions on Syria, on visiting the region without going to Israel.
So could they run out of patience?
So far, on the Palestinian front, we're not seeing that. Could they? Yes, there's tension between Israel first and America first. It will probably require other countries to also take more of a lead to close that gap between the words we're hearing in the UK and elsewhere and the actions that are taken.
Okay, Hamas, by no means annihilated. They still exist. They're still there. But hugely weakened. That's got to be a factor in negotiations, hasn't it?
With the following really important caveats, Alex. First of all, Hamas's long-held position has been, we will hand over governance in Gaza. That should be enough.
It's pretty wild. I mean, this person is literally an Israeli negotiator, a former Israeli negotiator. Like, it's gotten to a point where current and former Israeli negotiators that have worked within the Israeli government to negotiate directly with Hamas are the voices of reason in this conversation. I guess, like, he's always been a voice of reason in this conversation. It's just like people with real proximity, people with direct conversations, people who have involved in direct conversations with any part of the governance structure or any part of the Palestinian resistance have an entirely different attitude on the situation than people who do not, or people who are ultimately interested in the continuation of death and destruction in the Gaza Strip. And Daniel Levy, look, this guy is not wrong. Daniel Levy's a colossal piece of shit. He said in an Intelligence Squared debate that it was racist to compare Israel to the Nazis. I don't know if his opinion is still like that, but you have to understand, like, you have to understand. No, I know, Chatter. I'm not using him as an example of like a peace-loving dove, okay? I'm saying that there are people who are not peace-loving doves who are within the Israeli government, that have worked within the Israeli government, that are also saying the truth. You can be a piece of shit otherwise. You can be a racist otherwise and still say the truth in this matter. It's important. It's no different than using the words of Ehud Olmert. Am I using Ehud Olmert as a example of like how peace-loving of a society Israel is? No, obviously not. It's more so to show people who have no ideological investment in the humanity of Palestinians, people who have worked to eradicate Palestinians in the past, are basically arriving at the same conclusions because it is undeniable. That's it. It's undeniable. It's undeniable what is taking place. It's called a reluctant witness. Sure. I don't know why this one chatter keeps saying it's an ad break. I'm not running any ads, but you can still subscribe at the top of the hour or in the middle of the hour, whenever you want to show your support to the broadcast, to maintain my editorial independence. This program is sponsored by you, the viewers. The Hasanabi Piker broadcast is sponsored by you, the viewers. Yeah, democracy now depends on a free press. Just like the Hasanabi broadcast depends on a free press. And in order to continue a free press, shouts out to the nation of Qatar, the beautiful, wonderful nation in the Gulf. And you, the viewers, by viewers like you. All right, bring back the cringe videos. I regret my statement I made 2 days ago. I didn't realize you were burnt out. No, I'm not. This is something that is very important to me. And I want to cover this, and then we're going to do some fun shit afterwards. Okay?
Position, no resistance movement is going to say we will disarm while occupation continues. And most importantly, if the Israeli commitment is whether you give the hostages back or not, we are going to continue to force you into tinier areas, forcibly remove you and destroy Gaza, then no one will wave the white flag in those circumstances because their own people are going to continue to be genocide.
And very briefly, this is because we're often told that critics say Netanyahu faces a straight nihilist proposition. It's either war, or for him, it could be prison because of corruption charges. That's another reason why he's in power and held in power by the far right.
There's that. There's his personal consideration, and there's the ideology. His coalition is committed to what they see as the permanent removal of the Palestinians. If impunity reigns, that will happen, because what Netanyahu does every time, puts his finger in the air. Can I still get away with it? Is it just going to be words from the UK and elsewhere, or will there be action? Are the media going to insist on coming in and filming this? That's what he tests every time. If the results come back, impunity is all right, boss, we will see the continuation.
Right. Daniel Levy, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Alex.
Hamas says it's submitted its response to a proposed ceasefire deal to the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Hamas has issued a statement saying this proposal aims to achieve a permanent ceasefire, a comprehensive withdrawal.
How do you actually pronounce Qatar? It's Qatar. In Turkey, we say Qatar, but I think it's Qatar.
From the Gaza Strip and ensure the flow of aid to our people in the Gaza Strip. As part of this agreement, 10 living Israeli prisoners held by the resistance will be released, in addition to the return of 18 bodies.
Yeah, one of the greatest examples of Israel's lack of interest in actually an amenable conclusion to all of this and a ceasefire is that every single time Hamas says, yes, we will abide by the deal that you've designed for the Palestinian population, they go, nope, that's unacceptable. The American envoys come out and say, Hamas is up the bag for everybody again. It's all Hamas's fault. And then Israel further brutalizes the Palestinian population. It's like, you're in a bind at that point. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you say no, then Israel says, well, see, these guys are not playing along. They do not want to defend the Palestinian population. They don't want to save the Palestinian population from what? From, Israeli bombardment. But obviously it's like a standalone force on its own, I guess, Who knows? Who knows where this violence is coming from? But then when they actually do follow through on the ceasefire negotiations and they say, okay, we'll abide by your principles and we also want to dissolve. This is like the thing that you wanted us to do. They go, nope, unacceptable, you. And now we're going to bomb extra hard. So what are people supposed to do in this situation? Because if you recognize that there is a real genocide going on, a real ethnic cleansing campaign that's taking place, which it is, right? If you recognize that, then you understand that these guys are not trying to actually deal with the end. Because an end to the ethnic cleansing campaign means that Benjamin Netanyahu ultimately failed in his overall goals. Okay? He has a limited time in office. And his last act after his 40-year stint is basically the permanent ethnic displacement of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and a permanent occupation of the Gaza Strip. the West Bankification of the Gaza Strip. That is the goal here, right? So if they don't achieve that goal, if that's the final goal, if that's the final solution that they have, if Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't achieve that, then he's failed in his overall ambition. Okay? And not only will he fail on that overall ambition, but also on top of that, if they were to let in international press and outside investigators into the Gaza Strip once a permanent ceasefire takes place, then we will know the full scale of atrocities. Because right now, when you're in here, when you're watching this stream, I obviously still have ultimately a very limited reach. And that limited reach is constantly under threat regardless, with deplatforming and whatnot. It's just me, Drop Site News, Democracy Now!, basically trying to work in collaboration with journalists on the ground and like content that like Palestinians are creating about their own ethnic cleansing campaign that they are victim to. But once mainstream press gets in there, once Clarissa Ward gets in there, once like CBS, CNN, NBC, and they get in there and they start talking about the conditions on the ground, all of a sudden there will be an entire attitude shift. That attitude shift has already started with the permission structure given to Western press and legacy publishers in the West, where the governments have started criticizing Israel directly. And now all of a sudden you see that attitude shift happening. But that will turn into a tsunami, and Israel knows that. And that is precisely the reason why they are trying to do their very best to continue the bombing until the ethnic cleansing campaign is completed. This is their goal, which is why I always stress you cannot stop the pressure campaign.
Exchange for an agreed upon number of Palestinian prisoners. Let's bring in our correspondent, Hani Mahmoud. He's joining us live from Gaza City. And those three things mentioned by Hamas are the issues that they want concrete assurances on for any ceasefire deal to go ahead, Hani.
Well, absolutely. These seems to be the cornerstone of any agreement or a permanent ceasefire or a truce that will bring an end to the ongoing genocidal acts on the ground. The press release by Hamas made it unequivocally clear that these three things are important. Their response to the mediators was within the framework that will ensure a permanent ceasefire, a full and comprehensive withdrawal of the Israeli military from across the Gaza Strip, from the areas where it's operating aggressively right now, and then ensure the free flow of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. And at this point, just given the pace and the patterns of humanitarian aid and all the surrounding elements to distribution of aid across the Gaza Strip, Gaza is in need of a flood of aid just to make up for the lack of many of the basic supplies for the past months. This will happen, of course, in exchange for 10 of the Israeli captives, 10 living captives inside the Gaza Strip, as well as 18 of the bodies who were killed due to the Israeli airstrikes in the past 20 months as the Israeli military continued targeting areas.
Will Dems break with Trump on Israel? No, they have not, and I don't think they will. I've seen Lib Dems on TikTok saying they're abandoning Palestine since pro-Palestine activists didn't fall in line with Harris. But where Harris actually been different, will Dems break with Trump on Israel? It's insane given the vibe shift that they're still falling in line. No, because the Democratic politicians do not care about the wishes, the Democratic wishes of their base. They do not care about the broader wishes of the American population either. We here in this community are obviously a lot more passionate and a lot more aware of exactly what's going on day to day within the Gaza Strip, okay? Most Americans are not. But regardless of their lack of care, most Americans understand the asymmetry of violence. Most Americans understand that there is untold and countless amounts of children being destroyed in the hands of Israel. They understand that our involvement in this is our tax dollars and our money going to the state of Israel. They understand that like there's impact internally in the United States of America as far as like a censorship regime being done at the behest of Israel, a foreign nation. So the attitude from the Democratic Party has never really resembled the attitude of the broader wishes of the base of support within the Democratic Party's voter base for any issue. whether it be healthcare, whether it be improving, increasing minimum wage, or whether it be offering any sort of real solution to the housing crisis, right? But on this issue, on foreign policy, on matters of foreign policy, Democrats don't ever step outside of the line that is a singular focus for all parties involved, no matter what. That's why I always say foreign policy is uniparty in this country. And if you noticed, the Trump administration, much has been made about the Trump administration actually changing the direction of American foreign policy. And what have I always told you? That American foreign policy is uniparty. So what you're seeing from the Trump administration on the aesthetic front might be a little bit different. But ultimately, especially when it comes to the State Department's ambitions in the region, their grand design in the region that revolves around Israel dominating and ethnically cleansing the entirety of the Gaza Strip, they are completely in line. The Democrats and Republicans are completely in line with one another. This is why you're seeing, with some aesthetic differences, you're seeing basically the same exact outcomes and the same exact style of consistently blaming Hamas for Israel's ceasefire violations and Israel's lack of interest in following through on a reasonable ceasefire negotiation, in the exact same way that the Blinken-Biden team-up did for the first year of the ethnic cleansing campaign.
Densely populated areas across the Strip. Now, just back to one of these 2 points, the full withdrawal of the Israeli military and the comprehensive full withdrawal of the Israeli military from the Gaza Strip and the free flow of aid. These were the main 2 issues on the first phase of the ceasefire.
How do people listen to this guy? Very carefully, hopefully with their ears open. If you want to understand the position of broader society and like mainstream media 5-6 months down the line, listen to what I'm saying right now, okay? If you want to know exactly the position that you're going to arrive at 6 months later, listen to what I'm saying right now. Pay attention to what I'm saying right now. You don't have to agree with me, but you will inevitably come to that conclusion 6 months later when you hear it from New York Times, MSNBC, CNN. 6 months ago, everything that I was saying was seen as completely unacceptable, and now it's perfectly acceptable in mainstream media. How did that happen? Okay?
We know during the 42 days of the agreement in January, the Israeli military failed to live up to the terms of the agreement, did not allow the flow and a free flow of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, including much needed heavy machinery and equipment and other basic necessities needed for the hospitals to ensure their continuity and operations across the Strip. There was also no attempt by the Israeli military to withdraw from areas that it occupied right after October 7th, and many of the people were unable to return to their homes in the eastern part of the Gaza Strip and the northern part of the Strip, as well as the city of Rafah. Let's remind our viewer, during the 42 days of the ceasefire agreement of January, more than 60% of Rafah city was under the Israeli military control and was effectively in line of Israeli fire. So more than half of the population of Rafah city could not make.
America stands with Israel because of the implications of not doing so. If the American government can be pressured by its populace on foreign policy, then it's a terrifying prospect for American planners as they could be pressured on other areas. No, I don't disagree with you on that. But also on top of that, I think beyond like recognizing that public pressure works, which is really scary for them, the other side of the story is also that if Israel is prosecutable, then maybe America is prosecutable for the same exact war crimes and the continuation of Israel's genocide, which America has basically played a formative role in. There's also that fear that Americans have. That's why they were so aggressively pursuing the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice for the dual prosecutions that are taking place, both on Israel doing a genocide in Gaza and also Israeli leadership doing war crimes in their pursuit of genocide in Gaza. That is also terrifying for them. The other side of the story also is their lack of interest in changing trajectory. American foreign policy is directional. Once they set out their 10-year project or 15-year project, or with Israel, it's a 77-year project at this point. once they set out to do this, it's very hard to switch gears. It requires a tremendous amount of pressure. It requires a tremendous amount of state pressure from other states pressuring the United States to change trajectory. It requires a tremendous amount of pressure from the American public constantly protesting against the American state in an effort to change trajectory. Like, it requires a lot, and it doesn't happen overnight. This is an incredibly difficult process, and I try to explain to people, like, there's an immense death toll associated with this movement. And I understand feeling discouraged, and I understand feeling like no change is happening, so why even bother? But the reason why I constantly stress the importance of maintaining pressure, protesting, putting bodies on the streets, engaging in direct action, the reason why I stress the importance of that is because they want you to feel nihilistic. They want you to feel discouraged. They want you to stop doing this so that there is no penalty, so they can get away with this ethnic cleansing campaign. Even if there is no immediate solution, even if this does not magically overnight turn around, you still have to maintain that revolutionary optimism, recognizing that, yes, it is a marathon and not a sprint, and that change happens marginally. It might feel like it happens overnight when it actually happens, but change happens through immense pressure. Sometimes that takes decades. All things considered, the attitude shift against Israel becoming a pariah state in terms of 77 years of dedicated special interest groups and tremendous amounts of money spent on propaganda, okay? Setting up organizations with immense influence, organizations that had tremendous institutional power, okay? All of that fell by the wayside because people recognized Israel's ambitions in the Gaza Strip were simply genocide and not a matter of self-defense. For many Americans, even if they don't say the G word, even if they don't understand what that G word means and the power that it holds, they still recognize what Israel is doing is wrong, and they still have negative associations with Israel now, and Israel is permanently a pariah state. And that seemingly happened overnight in comparison to how little movement took place. But even that took a long time. How did that happen? In 2021, a lot of the NGOs that are involved, both inside of Israel and also all around the world, openly stated that Israel was an apartheid state. Israel has been an apartheid state since its inception. And yet it took all the way up until 2021 for the NGOs to openly say that. Once that happened, there was a permission structure created to be able to openly say that and to be able to point to these instruments of justice and these authoritative figures, right? All of a sudden, when you say Israel's an apartheid state post-2021, people would still say you're anti-Semitic and what is the apartheid? I don't understand what you're saying. People will still respond in the same ways that they do now, but there was something else you could point to. That played a big role. That played a major role in changing the conversation, at least in like activist circles, at least in scholarly journals. Like this did not start post-October 7.
Way back. So once again, we're seeing these terms, these three are strongly visible in the response of Hamas, and the hope now the Israeli military will give a positive reaction to this, and from that point things can move forward. Without that, of course, things are going to be at the still point. And as the Israeli military made it clear in the past few days, it has the intention of expanding the military offensive across the Strip. And of course, throughout the day, just hours before this press release, close to 10 residential buildings have been destroyed. The whole entire commercial street in Old Gaza City was destroyed due to the ongoing bombings. And that did not stop, of course. And as we talk, there are more of the drones, more of the fighter jets are hovering and patrolling the skies of the Gaza Strip.
Hani, thank you very much for that update. That is Hani Mahmoud with the latest live in Gaza City. Let's take a closer look at the situation inside Gaza now. 81% of the Strip is designated as a military or no-go zone by Israel. That means 19% is a so-called safe zone, which Israel regularly bombs.
Yeah, by the way, there's no safe zone. Safe zone designation is an internationally recognized designation. When you say an area is a safe zone, that means the belligerent occupier, which is Israel, cannot bomb that area. And yet they frequently do, which is why they have called it safer zones, right? They have changed the dynamic of what it means to be a safe zone. Just like they are trying to actively change the dynamic of aid. Humanitarian aid is supposed to be conducted by independent outside organizations. It cannot be done by the belligerent occupier. And now with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is partially funded by Israel and partially funded by the United States of America, the two belligerents in this conflict, right, in this extermination campaign, they have also started weaponizing aid, okay, which is illegal. It is against international human rights, but doesn't really matter, obviously. How close do you think we are to being regarded as absurd in academia that Zionism is anything other than fascism? It's not there yet, but the same could be said of apartheid discourse prior to 2021. I think that is going to take a much longer time because a lot of academics have a liberal Zionist slant and an ultimate refusal of recognizing that Zionism is a fascist ideology, an exterminationist ideology. That probably will take a little bit longer, but it doesn't have to get there. It doesn't have to get there for there to be a ceasefire is my point. Like in the short term, I'm focused on a permanent ceasefire. In the medium term, I'm focused on starting a Palestinian sovereignty initiative so that there is a recognition of statehood and a sovereignty. And then in the final term, in the longest of terms, I hope that there can be initially a binational commitment and then a singular solitary state. This will require tremendous amounts of international intervention. This will require tremendous amounts of pressure. It requires you it requires you to be committed to justice unconditionally. But I think I think there is a possibility of getting there.
Before the war, Gaza was already one of the most densely populated areas in the world, with more than 5,500 people per square kilometer. Now more than 2 million people are being told to cram into a tiny area of the Strip that would make the population density nearly 33,000 per square kilometer. And then there's the barring of movement. Two of Israel's military corridors, the Netzarim and Morag, completely block Palestinians from heading north to south. Lindsay Hutchison is the head of the Global Humanitarian Policy, Advocacy and Diplomacy Unit at Plan International. She's joining us live from New York. Thank you very much for your time. Firstly, we have been looking at pictures there from a few days ago, but they have just been released, of incredibly chaotic scenes of people trying to collect aid from this Israeli-American operation. How do you assess how it's conducting aid distribution?
Humanitarian organizations like us at Plan International, as well as our other humanitarian partners and the United Nations, warned before this distribution scheme by the Israeli government was put into place on Monday that this is what would happen. We saw chaos and despair at the distribution site, which is frankly masquerading as a humanitarian aid scheme. That's not what this is. And since then, this week, we have seen continual destruction of the Gaza Strip and starvation of the population because the Israeli blockade remains. And this aid distribution scheme, what they're calling it, is a militarization of humanitarian aid and is not working.
What do you mean by that it is a militarization of humanitarian aid? The UN, like you've said, has said that the scheme violates humanitarian principles. You're saying that it's actually a militarization of aid.
Exactly. The Israeli scheme to distribute limited supplies is really what this is. Has been condemned by us at Plan, as well as the UN and others in the humanitarian sector, as violating the core humanitarian principles that we all are obligated to abide by: humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. Having military control aid and choose who they distribute it to in limited ways completely violates the way that humanitarian operations are supposed to be conducted. We see people trying to get limited amounts of food, and it's only those who are actually physically able to get to the distribution sites. This means that women, people with disabilities, and children, who are often the most vulnerable and are the most vulnerable people in Gaza right now, are unable to access this. It's also not enough.
You've argued for a single state/entity for as long as I've seen/known you. This does not benefit the Palestinians, in my opinion. If it does happen, Palestinians will either be in the same position as Native Americans now or Black Americans who still fight for equality. If you can't comprehend how much better of a situation that would be for Palestinians if their living conditions right now resembled the living conditions of Black Americans that have full-blown American citizenship and at least on paper have the same rights as white Americans do, I don't know what to tell you. Okay? Like, that is insane. Yes, I understand that. The other side of the story also, number one, it is an immense improvement on their living conditions because right now they're facing ethnic cleansing, permanent ethnic cleansing and ethnic displacement. Okay? Not only that, but also a two-state solution cannot happen without the complete wiping out of all of the settlements in the occupied West Bank, which Israel has rendered impossible. There are 750,000 Jewish settlers living in both the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem. What do you do with all those people? Do they remain a part of the de facto Israeli state? Then there's no contiguity for a Palestinian state in the West Bank. 22 new settlements were announced by the Israeli government 2 days ago in the West Bank. 22 new settlements were announced by the Israeli government in the West Bank only 2 days ago.
This is just part.
The two-state solution and the so-called peace process has made it so that Israel can push this conversation back multiple decades while simultaneously continuously building Bantustans and surrounding the ethnic enclave of the indigenous population in the West Bank in direct violation of international human rights and all law. All international legal authorities have told Israel to stop doing this, and yet they have still maintained this project. It is already a single state. Israel currently is a singular state. Whether Palestinians or Israelis recognize that reality or not does not matter. Israel is currently the only state there. It is an apartheid state. It is a state that occupies the lives of 5 million Palestinians, both in the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank. They threatened to annex the whole West Bank if European countries recognized Palestine 2 days ago. Yeah, I mean, threaten, but they already do. They already have annexed the entirety of the West Bank. That's my point.
Unfortunately, of the Israeli government and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation masquerading as an attempt to show that they are actually allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Yeah. The other side of this also, yes. Another difference is Palestinians will make up the majority population in a single state. There's already, 25% of the Israeli population is Palestinian citizens of Israel. On top of that, if you were to add another 5 million, 2.5 in Gaza, 2.5 in the West Bank, and then with a right to return, a total of 15 million Palestinians, it is now all of a sudden, 7 million Jews in Israel, as opposed to 15 million Palestinians. This is the dangerous reality for Israel that wants to maintain its demographic majority. That is the reason why they won't do it. That is the reason why they don't do these things that, like, liberals should, under normal circumstances, be incredibly skeptical of. Like, why should apply a little bit of scrutiny towards, like, what do you mean you can't just, like, let people back into their homelands? Like, what are we doing? This is 2025. They do not want to have a democracy. That's the point. You can either have an ethno-state or you can have a democracy. You can't have both. You can't have a democratic ethno-state, at least in Israel, okay? There are, quote-unquote, democratic forms of governance in other countries that also resemble ethno-states, that have ethno-state style anti-immigration policies, like Japan, But they did their ethnic cleansing of the Ainu population decades prior, okay? Centuries ago. That's it. And that was completely unacceptable when they did it. But the reality is, just because something happened in the past and it was unacceptable doesn't mean that you get to do it right now in broad fucking daylight. Unless you are the type of person who fancies themselves to be someone who would be on the right side of history, but right now as it's unfolding in front of you, you're objectively on the wrong side. If you are a liberal Zionist, if you are disinterested in a real emancipatory solution to Palestinians, right now, you don't have to think like, where would I be during Nazi Germany? Where would I be? Which side would I be on during chattel slavery? Like, what you're doing right now is exactly the side you would be on back then. If you, obviously you guys in this community are clearly on the correct side of this process. But your friends, your family members, people that you know that are committed to misunderstanding the situation or desperately trying to defend Israel right now are objectively on the wrong side, and they would have been on the wrong side throughout history.
We are still blocked from getting our trucks in, from getting the aid that is needed desperately by the population of Palestinian people in Gaza, who the UN has just called the hungriest place on earth.
Yeah, and I understand that your organization actually has thousands of aid trucks waiting at Gaza's borders. We are seeing what's happening to people in Gaza without that aid. What's happening to the aid itself if it can't get in?
It's languishing at the borders. Plan and many other humanitarian agencies and UNRWA also have so many trucks full of humanitarian relief, of food, of medicine, of other essential supplies, and it's stuck while we're watching an engineered famine risk happening right now in Gaza. It's just stuck there. We can get it in. The UN has a plan. It's worked. It was difficult before the 3-month total blockade to deliver aid to the Palestinian people because the Israeli military kept bombing, killing relief workers, killing civilians, and that's continuing. But we managed to get them food and medicine. And now we're facing a situation where the entire population of Gaza is at risk of famine. They are starving to death. We've seen pictures and videos and our colleagues on the ground with our humanitarian.
I'm telling you right now, Palestinians who are lighter skinned, this will not be happening. Brother, what are you talking about? There's light skinned Palestinians and there's dark Arab Israelis. Like, it's not just that. Obviously, like, Ashkenazi Jews are the dominant international facing side of Israel for the most part, and they are white. But the idea that, like, Israel is visibly white is silly. I've said this from the start of this conflict. Like, if you were to do a lineup where you were to put people from Israel and put people from the Palestinian state side by fucking side with one another, you would not be able to figure out who is Israeli and who is Arab. The perception of whiteness in this regard is not about the color of someone's skin, but is the socio-political whiteness concept applied, as in the in-group that holds all the power.
Partners have seen children die of starvation in front of them, and there's not much they can do about it right now. And all the Israeli government has to do is stop the bombing and let the aid community in who knows how to do this and has proven we know how into Gaza before it's too late.
And what are the conversations, if any, that your organization is having with Israeli officials about letting...
Yeah, remember the story of the Jewish guy in Florida that shot the 2 Israeli Jews thinking that he was shooting Hamas supporters? And the 2 Israeli Jews who are of Arab background thought that they were getting shot by a Hamas supporter. Yeah. It's impossible to decipher. It's impossible to comprehend.
Humanitarian organizations do the work they know.
And you can't even do the Nazi technique of, like, seeing if someone is circumcised or not, because Muslims also get circumcised. So there is no, you know what I mean? It's like Islam and Judaism are very close to one another in terms of their religious practices too. So you can't even do that. It's just, again, it's all completely made up.
How to do to help the people there?
We've said for now months, perhaps 2 years really, what needs to be happening to facilitate this aid. We are constantly calling and having dialogue with stakeholders around the world who have an influence over the situation on the need for unhindered humanitarian access to all parts of Gaza to help all vulnerable people in need, not just the areas where the Israeli government and the GHF have deemed to deserve or be potential distribution sites. That's not how this works. Instead, what this really is forcible removal of the Palestinian people. And it's not legal. We've constantly reiterated that the Israeli government, as the occupying power, has the obligation to facilitate unhindered humanitarian access, and that starvation cannot be a weapon of war.
A crusade against
Israel is slamming Macron's crusade against the Jewish state. All of a sudden, yeah. Oh, wow, Macron, how anti-Semitic of you to say that Israel shouldn't do a genocide.
the Jewish state. The accusation leveled at Emmanuel Macron from the Israeli foreign minister after the French president announced his intention to recognize a Palestinian state out of more.
Yeah, applying phenotypical whiteness to the Levant doesn't really make sense because there's a huge range leaning towards people being generally white. It's all about racialization of Islam and those associated with the Muslim populations, as I'm sure you know. Exactly. There's that. And also, whiteness as a socio-political construct is just simply the in-group, okay? It's like how in India, the Brahmin are considered the white class, even though in the Western world, Brahmin Indians that come to the Western world are not treated as though they are a part of the fucking in-group or a part of the dominant force. They're treated as brown. Sometimes they're even mistaken for being fucking the racist meme is like, are you a 7-Eleven brown guy or are you a 9/11 brown guy? Like, that's it. There is no... Like, whiteness as a socio-political construct simply just means those who have the power. And in this circumstance, in Israel, it just means the supremacist power, the supremacist domineering force being Jews. In Israel, it is Jewish people. It is their own desired and stated statewide demographic configuration. That's why the easiest way to understand this is when you look at Israeli demography, the Israeli government, when they release information like polls and whatnot, they'll say Israeli or Arab, okay? They'll say Jew or Arab, sorry, not Israeli. When they're looking at Israel proper, they will say this is what the Arab population of Israel is saying and this is what the Jewish population of Israel is saying. Meanwhile, the majority of the Jewish population of Israel are still Arab Jews and from the MENA region. This different designation does not change the reality that their ethnic background is still very much Arab. Okay? The other half is Russian and Ashkenazi Jews. Russians with no Jewish heritage even, or a complete severance on the matrilineal side, and yet they still were able to get Jewish citizenship into the state of Israel. When they say Arab, they mean Muslim or Christian. That's all they mean.
Duty and not political requirement. A message which drew a strong reaction from Israel's defense minister.
A clear message to Macron and his friends. They will recognize the Palestinian state on paper, and we will build the Jewish-Israeli state on the ground.
On the humanitarian front, the international community is mounting pressure on Israeli authorities to allow more aid into the enclave as the 2.5-month blockade continues. Many nations, including France, say the aid that's trickled in so far is still a far cry from the amount needed to relieve a population in the grips of famine. Several European countries are now threatening Israel with sanctions and a re-examination of the EU-Israel Association Agreement.
If there is no response that answers proportionately to the humanitarian situation in the coming hours and days, we will obviously have to take a tougher collective stance. That is, to put an end to the current processes that have no regard for human rights and apply.
What do you mean? You should have done that months ago, dumbass. The do you mean? Oh, wow. If Israel doesn't let in humanitarian aid, we're going to have to take a more aggressive stance. I mean, look, Western leadership is spineless and they're useless, but it's still positive. It's a positive shift. It's like I constantly find myself in this weird position where on the one hand, I'm like, come on, dude. A day late, a dollar short here, don't you think? But also simultaneously, it's still a good thing because this, again, releases a pressure valve and allows people to openly, freely talk about these matters. Okay?
Meanwhile, the United States has announced a plan for a 60-day ceasefire, a proposal that Israel has accepted according to the White House. But Hamas, for its part, continues to demand the total withdrawal of Israeli troops from the besieged enclave and a definitive end to the war.
What is this? Why is this so low, the audio? Okay, so ex-Netanyahu official has an outburst on Sky News host.
Professor Jacob Nagel, former acting national security advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you so much, Mr. Nagel, for joining us here on the program. You heard
she's been cooking too.
There, Martin Griffiths, describing the situation in Gaza now as genocide. I also want to.
You mean the Hippocrates, Marty? It's so nonsense. It's saying so much.
Okay, well we can get to that if you just allow me.
Like her saying genocide on Western news is crazy. I never thought in my lifetime we would have Western reporters on like Sky News or like the BBC still doesn't do it. But the fact that you have Western reporters saying genocide to what Israel is doing is crazy, okay? I know so much death and destruction has taken place, and I know the human toll on this obvious shift is insurmountable, is unimaginable. But this is a major tide shift, okay? The only Ian Miles Chong tweet that I will ever like, Chong admits that Hasan Piker has won and most people agree with him and that Hamas is better than Israel. The fact that this makes Ian Miles Chong sad is icing on the cake. Hasan Piker is now saying the quiet part out loud, that Hamas is good actually. The streamer has 2.9 million followers on Twitch and major profiles in New York Times, CNN, NBC, Vox, Rolling Stone, et al. Seeking his wisdom on how Dems should reach young people. Is this how? His narrative has won. Most people agree with him, sadly. And it's not that my narrative is one, it's just the truth. Okay? That's it. It is the truth. You can't do a 19-month ethnic cleansing campaign and expect people to not recognize that the party that is doing the ethnic cleansing campaign is worse than the party that is resisting against that ethnic cleansing campaign. Yeah, also, I have been saying this since October 8th. It's not like this isn't new, for the record. I have been saying this since October 8th, 2023. Is true. I sometimes jokingly say I'm a lesser evil voter, and obviously Hamas is the lesser evil here. Is not new. It's just that more people are recognizing that this is the truth. That's the difference. There is no like narrative shift. It's just people are finally recognizing the reality. Okay? Yeah. By the way, your former podcast co-host responded to your criticism of having him on Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib and defrauding his audience. I think a lot of people don't understand, and I've been saying this because I have friends that work in these professional settings. I have friends that work in mainstream outlets. What have I always told you? There are a lot of people who recognize the truth. It's just that there isn't any permission from editorial control. Now they are able to be more truthful and speak truth to the matter of Israel. Before they were not allowed to. You would not be able to say it. You get fired. They call you an anti-Semite. That's it. Apartheid Defense League retweeted this, by the way. I know. It's Gabby Deutsch from Jewish Insider. You can't keep saying this is like an anti-Semitic statement, okay? You can't keep running around and saying this is an anti-Semitic statement. This is an anti-Semitic statement. Why are the editorial controls changing? Because there are always dual pressures. As I've said time and time again, there is the pressure for mainstream media to at least come across as truthful, okay? Because if the overwhelming majority of populations in the Western world look to mainstream resources and say, of course they lie about everything, and they're lying about this again. Oh my God, who gives a what they have to say. They don't have any power to influence the population. The goal for mainstream media is to be able to influence the population and propagandize certain positions. And they can't do that if they have no credibility. This is the reason why even outlets like the New York Times will have a fairly solid visual investigations team, for example. They'll have that so that they can still maintain the veneer of credibility in an effort to use said credibility to propagandize certain pieces of information when it matters most. It took them far too long to arrive at this conclusion, however, which is shocking. There are, of course, people who are still ride or die in this process and consistently engaging in a defensive posture while they continuously do Hasbara for the state of Israel by attacking Israel's enemies, by attacking people who criticize Israel from a truthful lens. But those people don't have the same ambitions. Ethan Klein, for example, does not have the same... Ethan Klein does not operate from the same mentality as mainstream resources do. He doesn't have to appear credible. He can be as biased as he wants to. He can be as silly as he wants to. And this is precisely the reason why he still hasn't gotten the notes that many people have gotten in outlets like Sky News. As you guys know, I talked about this briefly the other day. He had a Palestinian on, Ahmed Al-Khatib, a Palestinian who uses his family members that were killed by the Israeli state in an effort to offer some credibility to his position as he works for the Atlantic Council, a right-wing American State Department think tank. Remember, the United States of America is entirely responsible for this genocide. So Ethan is basically having a guy that's not as bad as like son of Hamas, who is a direct collaborator with Mossad, but a lighter version of that, a person that still has to maintain some veneer of credibility by, pushing for a more peaceful approach, a more peaceful solution, a liberal Zionist position. And he had this guy on, and his entire role in this is to basically say, you know who the real enemy is? Hamas. Hamas is responsible for all of the awfulness that has taken place. Hamas is the reason why Israel is just doing an ethnic cleansing campaign, which is, if you have a brain, an untenable position to arrive at. What do you mean? This resistance group is the reason why this much more powerful force is just like wiping out the entire Palestinian population. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But it doesn't have to make sense. Where do you see the backlash against slop tubers heading towards a hopefully post-genocide state where MSM adopts views that are different from them? There will inevitably come a time when we need to discuss and look back on who the creators who were enabling genocide and spreading racism in the online sphere. It's so far in the future that I don't even care and don't even think about.
Which one? I doubt we have time for all three of them. Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, there's one thing I wanted to just hit on before. I wanted to send my condolences to our previous guest, Ahmed Fuad Al-Khatib, who came on our show graciously and had a really... People connected with him. He was a fantastic guest. He's a Gazan refugee and advocate. And I donated $2,000, $1,000 to his charity and $1,000 to the Gazan food kitchen, which he suggested. And Hassan and Bad Empanada were immediately out to slander and ruin this man, which is just, the irony of that is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, when he says like Jews against genocide are tokens, he's wrong, okay? But this person is directly, it's projection. When Israel says like, oh, Jewish Voice for Peace is backed by Hamas, that's delusional, right? That's completely made up. It's a claim that is so ridiculous. Having said that, however, when Ethan is using Ahmed Fuad Al-Khatib, he is a literal token. He is a professional token. He is directly paid by the same institutions that have a formative role in the continuation of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Okay? Anti-Zionist Jews are prominent in the anti-Zionist movement in the Western world. I wouldn't say that in Israel, obviously, but in the Western world, anti-Zionist Jews play an incredibly important role. To tokenize them is laughable, is ridiculous. Whereas this guy absolutely does have a unheard of perspective in comparison to Palestinians in diaspora and Palestinians living in Gaza and Palestinians living in the West Bank. Also, his organization that Ethan donated to and urged his fans to donate to is not a charity. They gave money directly to the Atlantic Council under the auspices of, under the false notion that they were giving money to a Palestinian charity. They were not.
Thick, because it's like, actually, you know what? Here's a dude from Gaza who's lost family members, who's actually trying to advocate and raise money. And literally, by the way, when you go back and look at how he's plugging the charities, the emphasis is greatly on the food one.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally, definitely. There wasn't any plausible deniability there.
I forced him kind of to plug his,
Mm-hmm.
like, he didn't even really offer it. His whole thing was like, donate to this food thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not going to believe the shit that they're saying about him. It's unhinged, dude.
So
it's evil.
Ahmed Fuad al-Khatib, okay, is a propagandist for Israel.
He's not.
Apparently, Ethan had him on his broadcast. This might be. And then literally turned around and made it seem as though they were fundraising, told his audience that they were fundraising for Palestinians in Gaza. Okay?
Now, can someone timestamp from the episode when that happens? Because I'll pull it up in a minute.
It's really crazy how Hasan just doesn't want us to help Gazans.
Oh my God. Oh, they're so gross, dude. They're such disgusting genocidal propagandists. Oh my God. Oh, it's crazy how Hasan doesn't want us to help the Palestinians. Wait, did she even say Palestinians? Hold on, maybe she did.
It's really crazy how Hasan just doesn't want us to help Gazans.
Oh, she didn't even say Palestinians. She said Gazans. Yeah. Here, another great way to figure out Ahmed al-Khatib being a bad faith actor is that he calls himself a Gazan American. He doesn't even call himself a Palestinian American. That designation does matter, for the record. Because of that designation that he self-applies. That's the reason why the Israeli Foreign Ministry or other Israeli politicians will routinely retweet Ahmed al-Khatib. Okay? They do. Do you think that's normal? Do you feel like that's they would do that to a regular Palestinian living in Gaza?
Yeah, right. I mean, at this point, I've donated, I think, a pretty significant amount of money between all the different causes, over 10,000 for sure. I know there's no amount that...
Oh, sick. Oh, no, there's no amount except for how the Creators for Palestine charity was utterly inconsequential and actually unproductive and bad. But when he donates to actually make a statement, to say something, to prove his bona fides as a stalwart ally of the Palestinians after 19 months of genocide and consistently attacking people who are criticizing Israel for doing this genocide, all of a sudden, think about how much money I've donated. It's like, bro, it's like not even a quarter of a watch that you purchase that you forget about. Okay? Sick. Yeah. Bro drops 50K on a Rolex, will flex about it for hours and hours on end. Meanwhile, the people that have fundraised millions of dollars, they're the enemy. It's so gross. It's so fake. I can't believe people still bite that shit. I can't believe people still believe any of that, okay? If you are believing any of that, if you believe any of the stuff that he's saying at that point, like, you're either a delusional moron or... I guess you're just bad faith and you want to make it seem like you are pro-Palestine in the same way that, like, Ethan claims to be pro-Palestine. You have to be so unimaginably out of touch with the reality that, like, you're getting outflanked by the likes of Piers Morgan. You know what I mean? That's it. Yeah, the World Food Program is one of the actual humanitarian foundations that they linked. But the other one that they linked was actually was the Atlantic Council fundraiser for Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib. I mean, this is pretty basic Hasbara, but I guess it's still, but I guess I can still see like out of touch Americans falling for it if they're just completely oblivious. And after 19 months of this shit, you might still be completely oblivious, I guess. But yeah, I'm not talking about his donation to the World Food Program or asking their fans to donate to the World Food Program. I'm saying it's disgusting to literally put that side by side with Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib's own personal, not even like foundation, but fund, which is, from what I understand, is not even a 501c3. And people actually asked, people actually reached out to the foundation and asked where the funds go, and they very openly stated, "Oh, it goes to Ahmed. It goes to Ahmed for his speaking engagements, so he can go around and tour and speak peace, or whatever the." It's a slush fund for the Atlantic Council and Ahmed himself. So saying that you're like helping Palestinians by directly helping someone who has collaborated with the Israeli state is so gross to me. Yeah. And the Atlantic Council itself has also confirmed this, obviously, here. Melanie Robbins, formerly worked for the ADL, by the way, Apartheid Defense League, confirms directly, "Hello, thank you for reaching out and your question. The donations page on our website goes to support our work through the Atlantic Council. This includes helping Ahmed and our team and to allow him to be able to do many of the media appearances that he does, to meet with policymakers and do all the writing and things that have helped launch the work for Realign for Palestine. I hope that answers your questions. Happy to hop on a call to discuss if that would be helpful." Meanwhile, from what I understand, the guy was calling CARE a terror organization. Ironic, because AB's dad worked with CARE. And also AB himself did a fundraiser for UNRWA, which I don't know if Ethan or Hila ever actually promoted. But the very same groups that they defend call UNRWA a terror organization. He called it Muslim Brotherhood adjacent. Nice. Great.